I stood in the hushed expanse of the grand hall, the weight of countless eyes pressing upon me like a tangible force. The faint glimmer of torchlight flickered against the cold stone walls, casting long shadows that danced like restless spirits. My fingers trembled lightly on the neck of my lutan instrument that had become both my weapon and my curse. The forgotten tune, once a whisper in the dark corners of my mind, now roared in my soul with a ferocity I could neither deny nor escape. Around me, the assembly of kings and courtiers awaited with bated breath. Their faces were a mosaic of ambition, fear, and curiosity. Among them, King Maldron's gaze burned with a cold hunger, his twisted iron crown catching the light like a dark star. He sat rigid, flanked by his elite guard's silent sentinels of a looming threat. I could feel the shadow of his will reaching for me, eager to claim the power I wielded for its own ruthless ends. Leora stood steadfast at my side, her braided auburn hair a fiery banner of loyalty in the dimness. Her keen green eyes locked onto mine, conveying a fierce determination that steadied my wavering spirit. She needed me to succeed, not for glory, but for survival, for the fragile hope that this nightmare might yet end. And then, like a breath drawn from the depths of the cosmos, Melis appeared, ethereal as ever. Her silver hair shimmered with starlight, and her eyes held the solemn wisdom of ages. She came not with grand fanfare, but a quiet presence that seemed to momentarily still the very air. In her hands, she held the final verse, the counter-melody that could unravel the curse woven into the forgotten tune. "Eryndor," she whispered, voice like the rustle of ancient leaves, "this is the path to sacrifice. The song you must sing will sever the power, but at great cost. Are you prepared to pay the price?" I nodded, the resolve crystallizing within me despite the terror gnawing at my heart. This was the moment I had dreaded and yet hoped for, a chance to break free from the deadly dance of melody and fate. Taking a deep breath, I lifted my lute and began to play. The first notes were tentative, fragile, like the fragile threads of dawn breaking a long night. Slowly, the counter-melody unfurled, a haunting harmony that seeped into every corner of the hall. The ancient language of the vanished civilization whispered through the chords, weaving a tapestry of sacrifice and redemption. As the melody grew, I felt the familiar burn within, an agonizing reminder of the toll each note exacted upon my body. My fingers grew numb, my breath shallow, but I pressed on, driven by the desperation that had become my constant companion. The air thickened with the weight of magic unspooling, the power of the forgotten tune unraveling like a fragile thread pulled taut. I saw King Maldron's expression falter, his cold eyes flickering with a flicker of uncertainty as the chains of control slipped from his grasp. Leora's hand found mine, a silent anchor amid the storm. Her presence was a bomb, steadying me as the crescendo of the song reached its peak. And then, with a final, shattering chord, the melody broke silent, broken, and still. A profound silence followed, heavy as a shroud. My body sagged, exhaustion and pain crashing over me in waves. But beneath it all, a fragile seed of clarity took root. The power was gone, the curse lifted, and though I was broken, I was free. Around me, the assembly stirred, some with awe, others with disbelief. King Maldron's throne sat empty of the darkness that had once consumed it. The fragile balance of music and magic, so long threatened, had found a moment of reprieve. Leora helped me to my feet, her eyes shining with unshed tears of relief. Melis smiled faintly, a light of hope in her silver gaze. "The song ends," she said softly, "but its legacy will live on. In your sacrifice, a new melody begins." I looked out at the faces before me, rulers, rivals, friends, and foes alike, and knew that this was not the end but a beginning. The haunting desperation that had driven me into darkness now gave way to a fragile hope, a chance to rewrite the song of fate with a gentler hand. As the hall slowly came to life around me, I felt the first true peace in a long, long time. The forgotten tune was silenced, but its echo would forever remind us of the price of power and the strength found in sacrifice. And so, beneath the flickering torchlight and the watchful eyes of those who would shape the future, I began the quiet, arduous task of healing, not just myself, but a world bound by music's magic, at last free to find a new harmony. The song had ended, but my story was far from over. The first breath of dawn seeped through the thin curtains like a tentative promise, casting soft stripes of pale gold across the worn wooden floorboards. My eyelids fluttered open, not with the rush of triumph or dread, but weighed down by a profound exhaustion that clung to every fiber of my being. The silence around me was uncanny, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The power of the forgotten tune, once a roaring tempest inside me, was now nothing but a ghostly absence, a void where melody and magic had intertwined and unraveled all at once. I lay still for a long moment, the rough linen beneath me cool and grounding. The lingering taste of iron and smoke from the final performance was faint but persistent on my tongue. My body, frail and battered, ached in ways I had never known. Limbs that once danced freely with the music now felt leaden, as if tethered to the earth. But amid the physical ruin, an unfamiliar clarity bloomed in my mind, quiet clarity that seemed to whisper of a path I had not yet dared to tread. A soft creak stirred me from my reverie. Leora's familiar presence filled the room before she even spoke. She knelt beside me, her strong hands gentle as they brushed stray strands of dark hair from my damp forehead. Her green eyes, sharp and steady as ever, softened with relief. "You're awake," she said, voice low but fierce with something I could not name hope. Perhaps, or the fierce loyalty that had carried me through the darkest nights. I tried to speak, but the dryness in my throat turned my words to dust. She offered me a cup of water, her hands steady as she lifted it to my lips. The cool liquid soothed my parched mouth as I drank, each swallow a small victory. "You've done what few thought possible," Leora murmured, her gaze never leaving mine. "The tune is silent. The danger has passed." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to feel the surge of power I had once craved, the intoxicating rush of bending fate with a single note. But all that remained was a fragile thread of hope woven through the wreckage of ambition. The door opened quietly, and a figure stepped inside, ethereal, almost otherworldly. Melis moved with the grace of starlight, her silver hair catching the early light as she approached. Her eyes, deep and shimmering, held the wisdom of ages long vanished. "The music has stopped," she said softly, "but the language endures. The magic lies not in control, but in understanding. You have paid the price, Eryndor, but the melody's essence can still teach us." Her words settled around me like a bomb. For so long, I had been consumed by the desire to master and command, to wield the forgotten tune as a weapon or a crown. Now, the weight of that ambition had been stripped away, leaving a bare, fragile core of purpose. Outside the window, the world stirred anew. Birds sang their unenchanted songs, a gentle chorus replacing the haunting refrains that had once echoed through courts and battlefields. The kingdoms, long fractured by greed and fear, seemed to breathe easier, the tension of impending war giving way to cautious truce. I closed my eyes and let the silence fill me, not empty, but full of possibility. The ruined notes of the forgotten tune had quieted, but in their place was a softer melody, one of healing, of remembrance, and of the delicate balance between power and sacrifice. "What now?" I whispered, voice trembling with uncertainty. Leora's hand tightened around mine. "Now we rebuild. Not with dominion, but with trust." Meili smiled faintly. "And you, Eryndor, will be the guardian of that knowledge. The song may be lost, but its lessons will guide those who listen." I nodded slowly, the weight of my choices settling into a new kind of strength. The journey ahead was unknown, quieter and humbler than the path I had walked, but no less vital. As the sun climbed higher, light spilled into the room, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the still air. In that golden glow, I found a sliver of peace, a moment to breathe, to heal, and to begin again. The music had stopped, but my story was far from over. The silence was not an end, but a prelude to a new song waiting to be written. And so, with a fragile hope kindling in my chest, I opened my eyes to the world after the silence, ready to face whatever melody life would play next. Outside, the first tentative notes of a new dawn crept through the kingdom, a quiet refrain of renewal and fragile peace. The forgotten tune had been silenced, but its echoes lingered in hearts and minds, a haunting reminder of the cost of power and the promise of redemption. This was the world I now awoke to, a world changed and changing still. And I, Eryndor, once a bard bound by a deadly melody, now stood as its guardian, a witness to the delicate dance between music, magic, and the human spirit. The silence was a song unto itself, waiting patiently for the next note. The first rays of morning filtered through the canopy, casting slanting beams of light that danced like whispers on the forest floor. I stood at the center of a carefully cleared glade, the familiar weight of my lute resting softly against my thigh. Around me, a small gathering of faces, some eager, some hesitant, leaned forward, their eyes alight with a curiosity that both warmed and humbled me. This was no ordinary audience. These were seekers, those willing to listen not just to melody, but to the fragile threads of a lost language, to the delicate balance that music and magic once shared. It had been months since the silence fell over the forgotten tune. The echoes of its power had faded, but its legacy lingered etched in my bones, in the whispered memories of the vanished civilization, and now, in the cautious hope of those who gathered here. I inhaled deeply, tasting the crisp forest air mingled with the faint scent of wildflowers and moss. Grounding myself before I began. "Listen closely," I said, my voice steady, though my heart still fluttered with the weight of responsibility. "This is not just song. It is language, in ancient tongue woven in harmonies and rhythms that speak to the soul's deepest truths. To sing, it is to touch the balance between creation and destruction, between power and sacrifice." The students nodded, some clutching small instruments, others simply absorbing the words like a balm for old wounds. Among them, Leora stood slightly apart, her tall frame relaxed but alert, her keen green eyes watching over us with a protectiveness born of countless battles fought side by side. She caught my gaze and offered a rare, soft smile, an unspoken reassurance that this new path was worth every sacrifice. Meili's appeared then, as if summoned by the music itself, her ethereal form shimmering in the dappled sunlight. Silver hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her eyes shimmering like starlight held the weight of centuries. She stepped forward, voice lilting like a delicate breeze through ancient halls. "Remember, Eryndor," she whispered, her tone both a reminder and a blessing. "The language is fragile, like a thread binding worlds. Teach it with reverence, and it will heal. Teach it with greed, and it will unravel." With Malice's guidance, I began the lesson, breaking down the lost language's intricate motifs into teachable fragments. We practiced scales that shimmered like sunlight on water, phrases that rose and fell like the breath of the wind, and harmonies that wove unseen patterns of fate and free will. It was painstaking work, each note a thread in a tapestry fragile yet resilient. As the hours passed, the clearing filled with tentative song. Voices, once hesitant and uncertain, grew confident and clear, weaving together in a fragile harmony that seemed to pulse with a magic both ancient and new. The forest around us listened, leaves trembling softly as if in response, and the air thickened with a quiet power that was not domination but connection. In one moment, as twilight crept over the horizon, the group rose as one in a final refrain. The melody was gentle, a soft cascade of notes that carried neither threat nor command, but a promise of healing, of renewal, of a future where music could bind rather than break. I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth of shared purpose radiate through the circle. The haunting desperation that once gripped me replaced by a serene unity. Later, as the last light faded and shadows lengthened, I sat beside Leora beneath a canopy of stars. Her hand found mine, strong and steady, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I allowed myself to hope. This was more than survival. It was a beginning. "Do you think they understand?" I asked quietly. "More than you know," she replied, her voice a steady anchor, "and they will carry it forward, just as you have." The path ahead was uncertain, tangled with the remnants of old wounds and the fragile threads of newfound trust. But as the night deepened, the silence between us sang its own melodia, quiet song of guardianship, sacrifice, and the enduring power of memory. I was no longer the bard chasing a deadly tune. I was its keeper, its teacher, and perhaps its hope. The dawn would bring new challenges, but for now, we had found a harmony worth preserving. And as the stars wheeled overhead, I understood at last that the true magic was not in control or dominion, but in the courage to share, to teach, and to heal. The lost language was no longer a weapon, it was a gift, fragile and beautiful, waiting to be sung anew. And so, beneath the vast, indifferent sky, I began to write a new song, not of power, but of peace. But even as the melody settled into the night, a shadow stirred beyond the trees, an echo of ambition not yet silenced. The journey was far from over, and the balance we sought remained delicate. Yet in this fragile harmony, I found the strength to face whatever came next, one note, one breath, one song at a time. The great hall was unrecognizable from the last time I had stood within its towering stone walls. Gone were the palpable tensions, the whispered threats, and the veiled daggers in the eyes of strangers. Tonight, the air thrummed with a different kind of magica tentative hope, woven delicately through the notes of a melody that spoke not of dominion, but of healing. Leora was at my side, her presence a steadying force as I tuned my lute, fingers trembling slightly with the weight of what was at stake. "Are you ready for this?" she asked, her voice low but carrying the fierce undertone that had saved me more times than I could count. I nodded, swallowing the lump of doubt that always threatened to rise. I have to be, for all of us. The chamber filled slowly, nobles and warriors from kingdoms that had once eyed each other with suspicion, now cautiously taking their seats. Queen Iselda arrived with her usual regal bearing, her keen eyes settling on me with a mixture of hope and guarded concern. Talon lingered on the fringes, a shadow of unrest in his gaze, as if the music challenged something deep inside him. Taking a breath, I let my fingers find the strings, coaxing from them a melody soft and clear. It was a tune born not from the forgotten song's dark power, but from the fragments of peace I had glimpsed in my visions and the quiet moments shared with Leora and Melis. Each note was a thread, weaving through the crowd, stirring memories of better days and possibilities yet to come. As the music spilled into the hall, I saw the subtle shifts. A hardened soldier's jaw unclenching, a noble woman's eyes glistening with unshed tears, whispered conversations blossoming where silence had reigned. Leora's gaze never wavered, scanning for threats but also for signs of change. When she caught my eye, a small, almost imperceptible smile played at the corners of her mouth. The melody grew, wrapping around us like a gentle embrace, a balm against the scars left by years of conflict and ambition. Queen Isilda approached quietly once the last note faded, her voice a soft murmur. "This is a beginning, Eryndor, but fragile. We must tread carefully." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. Trust was a delicate flower, and we were only just planting the seeds. Yet within that fragile trust lay the promise of something greater, a future where music could unite rather than divide. In a shadowed corner, Talon watched, his fingers twitching as if aching to join the harmony but held back by pride and envy. His presence was a reminder that the road ahead would not be free of conflict. But even his conflicted energy was a chord in the complex symphony unfolding. As the gathering dispersed, conversations sparked like flickering flames, tentative but alive. Leora and I stood amidst the fading echoes of the music, knowing that, while the battle for power was far from over, tonight we had struck a chord of hope. In the quiet aftermath, I allowed myself a moment to dream of a world where melody no longer wielded chains, but opened doors. "Tomorrow," Leora said softly, "we begin the hard work." And with the dawn, so would I. The music had changed tonight, and so had we. But the true test was yet to come, a dance of shadows and light that would demand every ounce of our courage and faith. For in the echoes renewed, the future awaited, uncertain but shimmering with possibility. And as I sheathed my lute, a single thought sang through my mind: could this fragile harmony hold against the storm gathering on the horizon? The answer, I feared, lay not in silence, but in the next note to be played. The fire crackled softly, its orange tongues licking the cool night air as the stars spilled across the sky like scattered notes on a parchment. I sat beside it, fingers resting lightly on my lute, the worn wood cool beneath my touch. Leora was near, her auburn braid catching the flickering light, eyes steady and green as ever, watching me with a quiet patience that I had come to depend on. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, suddenly, breaking the silence that had settled between us like a gentle melody. I hesitated, the question lingering in the air, as tangible as the night breeze. Regret was a complicated chord, woven through my soul like the very music that had brought me here. The forgotten tune had been my ambition, my curse, and my salvation. Each note I had played carried the weight of lives changed, some for better, many for worse. "I regret the price," I admitted finally, voice low but clear, "but not the search. Without it, I would never have understood what power truly costs." Leora nodded, her gaze softening. "You've become a different man than the one who first found that melody in the market square." A faint smile tugged at my lips. It was true. The boy, driven by ambition, had long since been consumed by the song's deadly dance. Now I was something else, a guardian, a teacher, a bearer of a legacy forged in sacrifice. The journey had been long and perilous. I recalled Melis's ethereal presence, her words like riddles wrapped in starlight, guiding me through the shadows of the vanished civilization that birthed the forgotten tune. She had shown me that music was not merely a tool for control, but a fragile language, one that could bind or break the very fabric of fate. In her quiet chamber, surrounded by ancient scrolls, she had said, "The song remembers what we forget." Its power lies not only in sound, but in the spaces between, in silence and memory. Those words stayed with me, a haunting refrain echoing in the hollows left by my lost strength and fading vigor. I had sacrificed much, my health, my friend's safety, pieces of my own soul. Yet, I had gained clarity. The forgotten tune was no longer a weapon in my hands, but a warning etched into the air. At village gatherings, I now shared these stories, the melody's promise and its peril. Faces young and old would lean in, eyes wide with wonder and caution. I spoke not to inspire domination, but to teach humility, to remind those who sought power that every note carried a weight. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of violet and amber, I found myself alone with my lute. I traced the strings nervously, humming fragments of the old melody that had both saved and condemned me. The tune was no longer a siren's call, but a gentle whisper, a reminder of loss and redemption intertwined. I knew my story was far from over. The world still trembled on the edge of ambition and harmony, but I had learned that true power was not in bending others to one's will, but in embracing the delicate balance of music and magic, life and sacrifice. Leora's presence beside me was a steady anchor, and Melissa's wisdom a guiding star. Together, we would nurture this fragile hope, teaching the lost language to those willing to listen, ensuring the melody's legacy would be one of healing rather than ruin. As the night deepened, I played a soft, new tune, one born from fragments of the past and dreams of a gentler future. It was a song of peace, of quiet strength, and of the enduring human spirit. And in that moment, beneath the vast, endless sky, I found a measure of peace. But the world beyond still awaited its next refrain, and I would be ready to face it, not as a wielder of power, but as a keeper of stories, a guardian of the fragile harmony that binds us all. The melody may have faded from the thunderous heights of kings' courts, but its echo would forever resonate in the hearts of those who remembered the true cost of song. Yet, as I closed my eyes and let the final notes drift into the night, I could not help but wonder what new melodies would arise from the silence I had embraced. And would the world heed the lessons written in song, or would it to fall prey to the intoxicating call of forgotten tunes? The answer, like all great music, lingered just beyond reach, waiting for the next bard to dare to play. The legacy I leave is not one of conquest, but of caution and hope. And in that, perhaps, lies the truest magic of all.